Okay, today is 8th March. Welcome to the MicroProfile Live Hangout. Since we have quite a few things on the agenda, and the majority time will be the MicroProfile metrics discussion. However, just like before that, we'll quickly just have a couple, two little things. So I think in the last week's live hangout, the people, I mean, there's a concern about the certification process, also the wiki link, and also the website certification kind of like a certification page when to add the runtime logo to the certification. So I have I volunteered and take a to-do to update the create a new wiki page. So the process, basically the first thing is to follow the TCK process to file the certification record. After that being approved, just follow this whole process and then update the wiki. So because the starter will use the wiki to add a particular runtime to the particular version support. I think is we haven't got the page to list all the compatible implementations as yet, and also because between the certification approval and the wiki and the that corresponding runtime added to the microprofile.io page, there's a gap. So that's why we use a wiki to track the implementation, and also starter can just start working straight away and get an implementation and list the runtime. And then this is the third step is just raise the issue so that to get your runtime logo listed under the kind of microprofile.io to be announced the page. So the page is being drafted by Ryan. So hopefully a couple of weeks we'll be able to see the kind of the draft of that compatible implementation page. So this is one thing. The other thing is so last week on Friday, so Summers and Cesar, or Summers here, and I got together to look at the issue about site. So it's basically you can see it's kind of the not rendered correctly on the microprofile.io. Is a lot of people, quite a few people complained about this one. If you go to the project. And then go to, for example, go to the fault tolerance, conference, into a search. Oh, that's interesting. I cannot see the fault tolerance anymore. Or it's not very good. It's sometimes they disappear. So you can see here is all over the place. And also, so here is the format not done correctly. Summers has done a change, a PR recently. Summer, do you want to come off unmute yourself and talk? Because you did a PR, it looks like, I don't know what the next step to get it fixed.
Sure. So I made a PR for the website that includes the GitHub CSS, which fixes this issue. The problem is that the static content of this page is actually hosted out of WordPress. And I checked the code in WordPress this morning, and it doesn't match the code that's in the MicroProfile site GitHub repository. So I'm not sure which of the two is supposed to be the source of truth. I did some experiments this morning and trying to manually deploy some of the pages to GitHub, to WordPress from GitHub just didn't work right. So that's something that we're going to have to investigate, is what is the code in WordPress doing that the code on the website isn't doing, or the code in the GitHub page isn't doing, or the GitHub project. It's hard to keep the two separated.
Yeah, thank you. It's very complicated because it's we don't know the source of truth as yet. So there's a GitHub resource, there's a CSS, WordPress is kind of quite complicated. So by the way, we have meeting on Fridays on the MicroProfile calendar. If you have any free time or you are interested, please do join in, and so we can work together and get it fixed. Thank you, Samas. So I think it is a good start. I don't know whether Cesar is on the call. I didn't see him. Yeah, didn't see Cesar. So it's basically Samas and Cesar two, expert in this area. Yeah, if anyone wants to learn or something like that, contribute, please do join in. Okay. So it's that's for the two things, and that leads to this one, the metrics direction. So Don, do you want to take away? Do you want to share your screen? I can stop sharing.
Yeah, sure. I'll share my screen, Emily. Okay, so can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. All right, so there's been a lot of discussion on MicroProfile metrics and what our direction will be for the next release. We kind of rebooted this around the end of the year to have more discussion, I guess reset and trying to have a new discussion around the MicroProfile metrics 5 release, and sort of what we would do in relationship to the existence of other popular metrics APIs. So I'm going to walk through, I guess, our 3 options of what we are considering for MicroProfile 5, for MicroProfile metrics 5. As background to this, there's I guess 2 significant players in this space. One is OpenTelemetry, and OpenTelemetry has 3 signal types, which, tracing, metrics, and logging. And OpenTelemetry's metrics, the API itself is considered stable, but the implementations aren't yet finalized, even though they are expected to be soon. So that one's a new player, I guess, in metrics. They've been working on it for a long time, but the metrics is finally starting to get to a point of being stable. The other obvious elephant in the room is Micrometer. For people that use Spring Boot, they would be familiar with Micrometer. It provides a metrics API. It's extensively used and has metrics registries that allow servers to connect with a whole pile of different monitoring tools. At last count, I think there's 18 or 20 different monitoring tools that it can connect with. There are ways to bridge between OpenTelemetry metrics and Micrometer. So if you think of what I just said about OpenTelemetry having metrics and Micrometer having metrics, the challenge, I guess, that we have in some ways is that we're intending with MicroProfile telemetry to include OpenTelemetry. And so you might say we already have a metrics API, but then Micrometer is by far the more used API at this point for metrics. So I guess the question sort of comes up: how do you bridge the metrics between the two of them so that you can consume your metrics from a common endpoint? And so there are ways, both of those communities are working together to try to figure out how to bridge that in a good way. So there's already a couple of different ways to bridge from Micrometer to OpenTelemetry. And there's bridges in the other direction as well. So that I would say is still a bit fluid from my perspective. I haven't seen sort of a final answer on the best way to do this. They are working on something new in Micrometer 2.0 that's that will be coming out later this year that attempts to better integrate with OpenTelemetry. So it's still a bit of a moving space. So given the high level of adoption of Micrometer API, it's likely some people will want to use Micrometer when they're using MicroProfile apps. And given the momentum that OpenTelemetry has for tracing, it seems likely people will also want to use OpenTelemetry with apps that are providing MicroProfile support on servers with MicroProfile support. So in cases, in cases where people want to use both Micrometer and OpenTelemetry, that's where I'm sort of saying it's still, there's many options and it's not 100% clear what is the sort of the final option that will become the most popular way of doing the bridging. So with that, I'm going to talk about 3 different options that we're considering. Any questions so far? Comments? Okay, so the 3 options. Option number 1 is our next MP Metrics API, which is version 5, could require implementations be based on a specific Micrometer major minor version. So be MP Metrics 5 on Micrometer. The benefit of that, it's simple for app developers that want to use Micrometer. They can still use OpenTelemetry's metrics as well, obviously, if we're shipping MP telemetry. But specifically for what we're providing, they could use Micrometer API or MP Metrics API, and they would both end up in the same metric registry. It gives flexibility for app owners to decide where to direct metrics when they're using Micrometer and OpenTelemetry together. So it's user's choice how they want to configure the Micrometer or OpenTelemetry in the background. And app developers could add metrics using Micrometer or MP Metrics API, and they end up in the same metric registry, as I mentioned. So a downside to this approach, this is common to a couple of these options, but if we prescribe that vendors have to use Micrometer, then it's less a spec and more a product endorsement by MicroProfile, which in turn forces compliant vendors into the same endorsements. Also, by not being prescriptive about how Micrometer and OpenTelemetry are used together, it leaves that, basically pushes that problem down to the application that's using it. If they care to bridge those things together, it's their responsibility to do that. All right, so that's number 1, which is, I'll just call that MP5 on Micrometer. Option 2 is that we provide a single MP Metrics 5 API, MP5 Metrics API, and we require that vendors provide 2 implementations. And so app owners can choose to deploy with the implementation that puts all the metrics in Micrometer, or they can choose to package with the implementation that puts all metrics in OpenTelemetry. So the benefit of that is it's simple if an app developer wants to use MicroProfile or OpenTelemetry or Micrometer, they can use any of those. And obviously, if they're going to use Micrometer more, then they would use the version that comes with Micrometer. If they're going to use OpenTelemetry, they can do that. So basically keeps us out of choosing a side on that, and people can basically ensure that the metrics that the server provides and that the app provides end up in the registry that they want them to end up in. So that even applies after they've written the app and they've done their initial packaging. They can decide again, hey, I actually want to switch over to Micrometer, and I'm going to now switch to the Micrometer implementation of it. So be drop-in replaceable between the two different implementations. The cons, same con that I mentioned about us endorsing Micrometer or Open Telemetry directly before, it makes it a product endorsement. Using Micrometer and Open Telemetry together, you have to figure out how to bridge them if you are going to use them together. Doubles the work for vendors, that's for sure, and then potentially confuses users if they have to understand that there's two different implementations to choose from. And would be limited to anything supported by both Open Telemetry metrics and Micrometer. So MP metrics API is kind of going to have to do a lowest common denominator approach to support them both, which will mean that we're removing pieces of our API to make sure that we can map to both. And we can't ensure Open Telemetry and Micrometer would produce identical Prometheus endpoints and metric names. So it means that the monitoring community that's on the other side of this has to be more accommodative of the possibility that there could be, even on Prometheus endpoints, there could be different, different metric names based off of the naming conventions of Open Telemetry versus Micrometer, for example. All right, so that's option 2. So that's effectively, putting a MicroProfile API, a single MicroProfile metrics API, but 2 possible implementations. And third, you might guess this one, is provide an MP metrics 5 API that is implementation agnostic. This is the simplest conceptually. It just means the vendor can choose to implement it however they want. If they want to do it with Micrometer, then they can. Open Telemetry, sure. Drop Wizard metrics, sure. Fully custom, that's fine too. Basically, we don't care. Implement it however you want. And obviously, the benefit of that is it's flexibility for the runtime provider to implement the API any way they want, as long as they pass the TCK. And the cons on this, they won't have their metrics in the same registry. So apps that use Micrometer or Open Telemetry metrics, there's no guarantee that the implementation is going to use either one of those. So you may end up with metrics from the app in Micrometer, but from the from the server in some other registry. So across all of these, there would be some sort of common assumptions. So for the metrics API, we're trying as much as we can to be backward compatible between this new 5.0 API with the prior 4.0 API. We know already that there will be places, if we're going to try and map to things like Micrometer, where we're going to have to remove parts of our API to fit properly and without making it look like a, without a bunch of, method not supported exception kind of things. Prometheus output. So Prometheus is a really important output for us for CNCF and for running in the cloud. So we would require that any implementation be able to support a Prometheus endpoint. So on /metrics with the normal Prometheus, they call it their exposition format. And that would have the results from the user added metrics and the platform metrics. And metric names. So we would use a specific set of metric names, but generally we're trying to follow Open Telemetry semantic convention list. So they have metric naming for things like HTTP and process metrics. So we're trying not to be not to have MicroProfile have special metric names like we have in the past. We're going to try to fit with the rest of the industry and follow Open Telemetry semantic conventions for metrics, for metric names. And if you have any additional metrics that go beyond what we're specifying in the spec, I guess the rule would be to check the Open Telemetry semantic conventions to see if you've if you're implementing something that is also in OpenTelemetry's list, so that we stick with the consistent metric names. So yeah, that's basically where we're at. So we've got, just really quick recap. So number one, an implementation based on a specific micrometer version. So MicroProfile metrics on micrometer. Option two, one API, choose between micrometer and OpenTelemetry for the implementation. And we've got option three, which is vendor's choice, implement the API however you want. So yeah, another good spot if anybody has questions.
Yeah, I have a question. So the third option, metrics API, would basically creating a new API.
Well, we're in all three cases, we're kind of likely to end up with almost the same API, which is we're trying to keep almost backward compatible with metrics 4. So the intent isn't to invent something completely new, but yeah, it would be, so consider all three APIs to have almost the same actual API.
Thanks.
Okay, welcome.
Another question. OpenTelemetry has these 3 dimensions, traces, metrics, and logs, and also has a 4th specification called baggage to link these dimensions together. Is that reflected in the metrics 5.0 API design?
It really comes down to, I guess, a couple ways to look at that, right? For where I mentioned that you could have implementation based on OpenTelemetry, then yes, it would be just as if somebody were using the OpenTelemetry metrics API. So the correlation and sort of the common context that you have between the different signal types in those cases would be just as if somebody had coded with OpenTelemetry directly. From a bridging perspective, that's part of what they're looking at when we say like bridging from micrometer metrics to OpenTelemetry metrics. The context is also can be I guess saved across that, because I guess it's sort of on the thread. So as the MP metrics are, sorry, as the micrometer metrics are forwarding the metrics to OpenTelemetry, if it's in the same process, then I believe that you would get the same, effectively the same as, again, if you're kind of using the API from OpenTelemetry metrics to do it. So I think some of the questions about how perfectly the bridging works are yet to be answered. We need to play with that a bit, but that's part of why I think, the area that I find is least well defined at this point is how to interoperate between the telemetry side and the micrometer side. So that's why in part we're kind of taking the easy way out on that and not being too prescriptive about how we expect the implementations to handle the bridging, and that's something that users can configure if they want. But it should, I mean, in cases where we are forwarding metrics to OpenTelemetry, the idea would be obviously that you're able to correlate between the different signals.
So I have a comment on this because I'm aware that the Micrometer community and the OpenTelemetry community are actually talking, and well, they are talking about possible integrations between them. Shouldn't probably we get into that discussion before we make our mind? Because we might be, if we choose option 2, we might very well end up with a lot of work that's basically going to be unified.
I agree.
Yeah, that's a good comment. I mean, I think and for sure they are talking, and I know that I've seen like on their Gitter and stuff like that, that they have been working together for a while to try to get their story together. And I think even Micrometer 2.0 looks like it's adding the concept of observables so that people can hook in, people being things like telemetry can hook in to be able to be notified when observations change. So I suspect, as it goes forward, I could see open telemetry and Micrometer being more joined. I don't know if that means that Micrometer as a distinct API would go away anytime soon, considering how much Micrometer based user code there is out there. So I guess Bruno, your question is sort of, how do we avoid the chaos that would occur if they actually fully merged?
Yeah. Either merge or integrate in a agree in a standard way. Let's say that they can merge somehow.
I would like to comment on that because I had also thoughts on that topic. If I understand correctly, there is a specification being devised, open telemetry, for the community as a whole. We are collectively, and there are also initiatives like Micrometer and MicroProfile metrics around already, and looking at merging that towards the open telemetry spec. So I think if I put my developer hat on, if I know Micrometer, if I know MP metrics, for example, if I can choose how to write down how I see how to do metrics with the standard I use, and I'm comfortable with, I think that would be a very neat feature to have, not to have to choose between one of the specs, but like Quarkus supports both the Spring and the Jakarta EE program model, you can support multiple programming models in MicroProfile for metrics. So maybe that way we can evolve with the community in MicroProfile towards the initiatives that are for the open telemetry spec as a future vision, maybe. Yeah, I'm now just thinking aloud, but these were my thoughts on the options that are provided. So I think option 1 would be very neat to have.
Yeah, it's just a comment on what Bruno and Edwin said. Actually, I did ask, I joined the open telemetry call on Thursday. I did ask Jonathan from Micrometer. I said, do you have the intention to, like, in the future, to deprecate Micrometer API and adopt open telemetry API? They don't have that intention. I think the APIs will be coexist. At the moment, there's one bridge already, and then is merged, and the other PI is created for the other side of the bridge. So there will be a bidirectional bridge. So from this point of view, I think maybe they will coexist for some time.
Yeah, my sense is, given that this has been the programming model that's used in Spring Boot, and there's thousands of apps that are out there with the Micrometer API, I don't get the sense it's about to go away. I think the other thing that sort of feeds into that narrative is that Open Telemetry's metrics API it seems to be more focused on infrastructure providers or server providers than specifically for apps. So I think it could end up being that it sort of ends up that Micrometer is sort of the one that people use most in their apps, and maybe Open Telemetries gets used more for instrumentation of servers or something. But yeah, hard to tell given how new the Open Telemetry metrics one is. Open Telemetry is also polyglot, right? Like there's a language support for a whole bunch of different languages for Open Telemetry, which so that's a reason why the Open Telemetry one's not likely to go away. The Micrometer one's not likely to go away because it's used so much. So yeah, I don't see either one disappearing.
I think that the critical point here might be the integration of the multiple observability specs like tracing and logging and also metrics. Because one thing that we probably want to make sure we evolve is to have an integrated view with all these 3 dimensions at least. And whatever the solution be, I think we should make sure that we have tracing, but we also have the right metrics that correlate with the traces and the logs. So I don't know how we are going to do that if we focus only on micrometer in this case.
Yeah, well, I guess 2 things on that. So I have a feeling, like it or not, if we're going to do MP telemetry on top of open telemetry, it seems we're going to get the whole, we can't choose to just have tracing. Probably we're likely to, be using the whole API, which includes all 4 signals. So I think from that side, if we do MP telemetry as we've been discussing it, it seems like that whole kit is included. I think on the micrometer side, it gets back into the bridging discussion. How do we, how does the world work? Because it's obviously not just a MicroProfile issue. Everybody's kind of going to have to grapple with, Google and friends kind of building up open census and open tracing, merging, and everybody kind of coming together on one blended observability API. And meanwhile, Micrometer off in Springland coming up with the, the dominant metrics API, and now they're finally ending up in the same application. So we're not the ones driving how that stuff works together. I think that's going to be something that's priority for both of those 2 groups to figure out, because I think they do both want to be, continue to be dominant, but they kind of realize the need to work together. I do agree. I mean, the whole being able to glom onto the tracing logging metrics story makes a lot of sense, which I think that's why, telemetry is more than just tracing. And it's something that makes sense for MicroProfile as well. But yeah, I get your point. It's just I'm probably repeating the same comment. I guess it's just we need to figure out how the bridging is going to happen in practice. And I have a feeling it's not us that's going to decide that. It's probably Micrometer and open telemetry.
Yeah, thanks.
I was also going to put in a plug. I guess we're looking at doing a poll. So here's the proposed Twitter poll question, just written up a little earlier today. So this, obviously we're considering 3 different options, but if we're going to be micrometer focused, I'm trying to find out if that's palatable. So MicroProfile metrics community is considering requiring MP metrics 5 implementations be based on micrometer. Would you use it in your apps? So yes, micrometer has great integrations, and having a standard API as part of MicroProfile would be welcome. No, I'd rather just use micrometer in my apps directly. Or no, I'd rather use some other metrics API in my apps. So I mean, this, if we get all the votes that basically come back and say, I just want to use micrometer, go away. That's the one thing that we probably want to be aware of, because we're not the dominant player when it comes to metrics. And the real question is, are people going to see value in the spec and sort of being insulated from the different metrics implementations and CDI annotations and all that kind of stuff? Are they going to see value in that, or are they going to say, I'm already done with metrics, I've got micrometer? So if we get all votes on this, we might have to rethink our strategy.
So that means a standalone micrometer implementation, right?
Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, if everybody said, no, I'm just going to use micrometer, I don't need a MicroProfile in the loop to use micrometer, then it could be that we just declare, hey vendors, everybody should provide micrometer support, and in no API at all, right? Just say make sure that your metrics as a vendor can go into the Micrometer metric registry that's configured on the system, so that when when application providers are adding their apps that use Micrometer, that it all comes out the back end in the same endpoints.
Don, question. If we consider Micrometer or the second option, which is both, how are going to fit into their MicroProfile platform ecosystem? Let's put it this way: support other specifications, and to be a good player in the MicroProfile environment.
Yeah, I think what you're asking is like things like the REST API and the fault tolerance already have a dependency on MicroProfile metrics, right? So is that what you're?
That, and also support configuration, for instance. So kind of make all specifications MicroProfile-ish, right? Provide the same development experience, integrate into each other, this kind of stuff. If we just declare that we are this version of MicroProfile is using this version of Micrometer, there are not going to be any integration. It's just like as you were saying, as a con for number one. I don't remember what exactly was written there, but it's kind of aligned with what I'm going to say.
Yeah. So I guess there would still be some kind of integration, even if we didn't have an API. We could still be saying, I guess, two things. One would be that all the MicroProfile other specs like fault tolerance that use metrics would use Micrometer directly in that case. I think the other thing that we would probably do is the semantic conventions from Open Telemetry to make sure that our naming is, better for the industry than what we have today. So I think we'd still have that level of integration. You wouldn't have, though, you're right, you wouldn't have MP config based configurations or CDI based annotations and all that kind of stuff if we didn't provide the API.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
actually,
let me just finish my thought, right, Roberto, thank you. And if we change in future from Micrometer to something else, all the specifications will need to change too, right?
Yeah, if in the scenario where we were to just use Micrometer and not have an API, that's true.
I'm just afraid that MicroProfile becomes not really a specification, but it's kind of a recommendation of what kind of APIs to use to create cloud-native apps, right? So
yeah, I mean, I feel for the other side on this too. I know Roberto and others have made good points about, it's in this case, it's a space where there's a dominant API, right? So it's not such that we can just kind of define the API and have people, automatically come and use it. So I think the key question is are people going to use it, right? If people are going to use it, then cool. All the arguments about kind of insulation from the implementation and CDI and MP config and all those things, they all apply. But if nobody says that they're going to use it, then there are better things to do with your time than build an API that people aren't going to use.
That's actually a difficult question, what people are going to use. People are always going to use what they're familiar with, right? So if a Micrometer is included in Spring, I guess that's going to be the answer, right? But what we need to create is not what users prefer. Users prefer, as I said before, what they're used to, right? We need to create something which fits well into our goals, into the MicroProfile platform itself, right? So, and if they do it the right way, then people will start using that because they use MicroProfile. So, for instance, when we created JSON binding, right, Jackson was there already, right? And Jackson was the most popular. What we did was just took the best from every single implementation was on the market at that time and created the API, which is kind of combined, so best of all, right? I'm not saying that Jason Bunyan is more popular than Jackson, though, right? But I think it gets its market share.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I imagine we would get some market share by the fact that we're part of MicroProfile, and people that are adopting MicroProfile might look to use the APIs that come with MicroProfile because they know they're going to be, they're going to interoperate well. But yeah, I think it's still useful to sort of understand what the, at least polling is dangerous, right? I'll say that because you don't know what is going to go through the heads of everybody that's answering your poll, but I get your point, but it would still be interesting to see. Do we get anybody that's supportive of MicroProfile as a next step? And if we get a significant swell towards that side, then it's a pretty clear answer. If we get a significant swell towards Micrometer directly, then then it's a harder question to answer.
Yeah, so let me add regarding the previous question about, for instance, CDI and config. The prototypes that we have on OpenTelemetry tracing are fully integrated in MicroProfile config and CDI. And we work with the OpenTelemetry community to change some of their implementations and API to be able to fully integrate both, right? So I don't see a reason why the Micrometer, and again, or even the OpenTelemetry community is not available to do these changes if they see value in that. So for now, for instance, of course, I mean, if you look into OpenTelemetry, they're like a low-level APIs. They don't even know about CDI. It's just a matter of us defining how to set up the beams, and that's the thing that we do on our side. Regarding config, it's a little more tricky, but basically they have hook points where you can just feed configuration into their own APIs. And in that particular sense, you just grab your own config instance and pass in the configuration you want. And we were able to do that with OpenTelemetry tracing. So I don't think that we're gonna have a problem fully integrating with other Jakarta/CDI APIs to have the fully integrated user experience that you usually have.
Okay, so I think Roberto, your point is, we could just work with the communities, the Micrometer or OTEL communities, if we wanted to get some of these extra qualities of service or consistency that we're used to. We don't have to have an API to.
Sure. I mean, what I'm saying is that we already had that experience with OpenTelemetry tracing, and it was just fine to come over there, open a couple of PRs, explain to them why we needed such things, and they were willing to add those, right? So on the OpenTelemetry side, I'm pretty sure because we already have that experience, and because they already know us, that's going to be easier to convince them to add certain APIs or to modify certain things. Micrometer, I'm not sure, but I think it should be just a matter of discussing with them.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, perhaps it comes down to whether people are have enthusiasm about having an API that's part of the MicroProfile set of APIs for metrics, right? If people are interested in using that instead of coding directly to Micrometer, perhaps they want insulation from future wholesale changes of the metrics implementation, or they just want to use something that's part of the MicroProfile family. I guess that would be what might influence us to keep what we have. I think in the case of the tracing side, we didn't really have a tracing API, right? We just had the annotation back when we had open tracing. So it was sort of probably an easier story to figure out how to take the traced annotation that we had and see if OpenTelemetry could do something that was suitable for us, which is easier than the entire API, which is what we have today for MicroProfile. I think somebody else, Aaron Schnabel on the Red Hat side, was also suggesting if we did do a Micrometer based implementation, that perhaps we could get the Micrometer team to host that in one of their repos and you know, take some ownership of it as well. Which I guess that's I didn't get into that because I think I don't want to confuse what all the options are, but I think there are different ways that we could do this to work with the actual open source communities.
Sure. I mean, the metrics that we have right now, if we want to port them back to OpenTelemetry or Micrometer, will be more tricky because of, as you mentioned, the annotation and some other behaviors. In this particular case, I was only referring on the integration between CDI and config. That's definitely possible. Right?
Okay.
So I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Is sorry, do you want to go first?
Sorry, I just wanted to add something about the discussion about having our own API and Micrometer and so on, because from my experience, so my company, the company where I work, we have more than 400 services working, and we have all kinds of stuff like Ruby, Kotlin with Spring, Java with Spring, Java with Quarkus, Elixir, and Python, and a few others. And on the services that use MicroProfile, we use MicroProfile specs, almost all of them, except for metrics. And this is because more than the annotations and having something that produces some metrics is the ability to collect those metrics and do something with them. And for MicroProfile metrics, well, there's probably no support. You need to do all your dashboarding, you need to do everything yourself. So that's a no-go. And Micrometer, you see a few things, but if you are in a large enterprise across many services with many different languages, the most likely outcome is that you are going to hire some APM that is going to collect everything for you. And having some way so I think having Micrometer, metrics, and all of that is fine for small projects, but after a certain scale, you want to use something that has wide support on languages, frameworks, and so on. And well, we need to take that into consideration as well.
Yeah, I mean I think OpenTelemetry, the nice thing about you know, what they've done is a lot of the auto instrumentation that they have for being able to inject traces and metrics different places, and obviously there are lots of providers of similarly on the Micrometer side, they have meter binders that can bind with different projects to automatically do instrumentation. I think you made a good point of, you know, different languages and frameworks, which that obviously Micrometer is just a Java thing. The APM thing, I think that's a powerful reason for not sticking with the status quo of what we've got for metrics today, right? That today we only support the Prometheus format, and while, you know, different APMs support Prometheus format, it's not as capable of hooking into everybody's observability platforms as Micrometer with, you know, like I was saying at the beginning, 18 or so different backends that they can plug into. So that's one of the main motivations, is they've got a great ecosystem on the Micrometer side to hook into the APMs of the world. So yeah, I'm interested. It's interesting to hear you say that Micrometer is fine for small projects. I mean, obviously they probably think that they're good for bigger projects, but I think your point is you've got more than Java to play with, and
yeah,
you'd like consistency.
Yeah, and if you are going to a large well, medium large corporation, especially if you are dealing with data or machine learning, most of that code will be done in Python.
Yeah.
And when you are thinking your infra to collect metrics everywhere, you are going to take that into consideration, and you are not going to use Micrometer for sure by default, because you cannot use it in most of anything else.
Right. Yeah. Well, and then, I mean, in that case, you wouldn't use MP metrics either, right?
Oh, that's for sure.
You want to use polyglot.
You could use
metric.
open telemetry metrics, basically. That's
Of
the one
course.
that sort of cuts across.
Yeah, so
But-
the-
That's why all the
out
vendors
yet.
are on it.
Just out of
Yeah.
curiosity, but what are you using now?
An APM.
But what do you use to
I have-
instrument your apps?
All the APMs have an API that you can use for that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're going to use like directly use Prometheus API or directly use the APM's API, but
Yeah.
that's a bit limiting too, right? What if you decide to change APMs?
That's why
Sticky.
I don't have, in my case, I don't have many places instrumented with metrics. We also use, we actually use MicroProfile telemetry, and we have an infrastructure just for that. But that's a different thing. But for metrics in particular, we have usually the metrics that come by default by the instrumentation of the APM are well enough to start with.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
So-
I think that's often the case that APMs do their own injection of metrics, and they usually do a reasonable job.
But that's really a pain point. Changing the APM, which is collecting the metrics, is really painful because all the services need to change the agent or add a second one in the time where both APMs are collecting the data during the transition phase. And that was the reason basically Open Telemetry was found for, having that agent technology as an open source pool that you can choose to get all the observability data, and don't have vendor lock-ins on that side. So
Right.
every vendor of an APM can create a backend with a user interface, make use of that data, but collecting the data is open source and an open spec that could be implemented by everybody. And if you have a really high metrics load, you need something like Prometheus, which is collecting the data on a node from the services on that node, and then an infrastructure collecting the node's data on some central point and transfer to a dashboard to some tool. But I think that's the thing that is required, because all the node metrics data on modern system like Kubernetes installations is transmitted through an Prometheus API.
Yeah, so I think, Jan, your argument about the agent and that kind of stuff sort of leans towards using the open telemetry. So I think, yeah, it's interesting because I think open telemetry has the advantages of, the handy agent plugin capability and the polyglot support, that kind of stuff. Micrometer obviously has the advantage of just incumbency and a lot of existing apps that use it. So that's kind of how we got, I think, to option number 2, which was, don't make us choose. We'll just give you both and you can figure it out. So yeah, I don't know if any one of these is more compelling to folks out of the 3. So, a fully micrometer based version, a micrometer, or open telemetry, user decides, app decides. or a vendor decides what to implement the API with option. So I don't know if anybody wants to put a vote down at this point.
And what other specifications are going to integrate with if both of them are supported?
Sorry, what are they going to integrate to? Do you mean for like the APM side?
We have other specifications which potentially can be integrated with metrics, right? So if both
Oh,
support
yeah. I mean, all of the existing ones would continue to work. That's the intent, right? That we would hook in things like fault tolerance and REST and stuff like that into using metrics 5, whatever we implement that as. So I think that's common.
Right. Okay. We have. Sorry. Do you want to? We have a couple minutes left.
Would like
So-
to.
Oh, okay, Adam. Go ahead.
To kind of conclude, I'm not sure which option I'm going to vote right now, but I think for thinking about this as a whole, the value of what MicroProfile could provide here is the standards board that it already is, providing the state-of-the-art market-conform way of doing metrics. That's how to write it down, whether we support a MicroProfile API for metrics or whatever. That's writing it down. But also, what do we output, like Prometheus, or are there tools that use other formats? If MicroProfile implementations can provide multiple choices for this for a developer without really have to choose, but just use what they want to use in their implementation, in their daily work, then MicroProfile provides the value for developers to be a flexible framework and not be a niche for, oh, you can use MicroProfile if you use Micrometer, or if you don't use Micrometer or not.
Yeah.
So
yeah, which is a good story if you're an app vendor, right? That you don't know what your consumers are necessarily going to monitor you with. So it'd be nice if you can instrument, but still, be flexible to the APM they want to plug in.
Exactly. So that could increase the adoption of your profile because your base can grow. Yeah, possibly.
I think, Edwin, that's a vote for Micrometer. Whether or not we put an API on top of it, it's sort of supportive of what Micrometer's strategy has been to provide all sorts of backends that you can plug into easily.
Exactly. So right, and then complemented MicroProfile, then you have a broader framework of just only the metrics, right?
Yeah. Okay. So it's on top of the hour. That's a great conversation. So I have a couple of things. One thing is kind of for the Twitter, for the questionnaire, I suddenly realized I think there's a lot more Spring users than MicroProfile users. I'm wondering, like this, like a Spring developer, Spring they will automatically choose 2, but it's not something we want to hear from.
I know that's the danger is we could be overwhelmed by just Spring users saying I want to use Micrometer because I use Micrometer already. Absolutely.
I think it's kind of what Dimitri said is maybe we should work out our own roadmap, we discussed among ourselves. I'm wondering with that 3 options, what shall we go next? Should we post on the kind of the Google group discussion and then start asking people to vote? Maybe the vote, one
vote or comment,
vote or comment with the priority, 1 being most preferred and 2 and 3, and then we can discuss more.
Okay.
What are
Makes it sense to have that discussion on the mailing list because that is saved forever.
Yeah, at least we track the right community. We don't want other people wreck our boat.
That's true. Saboteurs.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any last minute comment? Okay, that's a great conversation. Thank you so much, Don, and for this great discussion.
Yeah, thanks for your feedback.
Yeah, this was good stuff. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you.
thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.